need to be honest, guys. We've been doing a lot of talking about Halloween and Halloween themed games here on Never Enough Gaming throughout the month of October. And as much as I love Halloween, I need a bit of a break. I just wonder what I could do to kind of give myself a break from everything, to get far away. Oh, maybe I could climb a mountain. Doesn't that sound like fun? I could get far away from everything, be alone with my thoughts up on the peak. I could maybe reconnect with my creativity. Maybe I could find one that has a city on it, the ruins of an ancient civilization, the remnants of some elder gods. Oh, maybe I could find some relics and artifacts. Maybe I could bring these discoveries back home with me and show the world that there was once an ancient civilization on this planet before humanity. Oh no, this sounds like it's turning into a game review. Oh, this is driving me mad. Ah, well, I guess that's fitting, because today we're reviewing Mountains of Madness. Okay, so Mountains of Madness is a really cool game. The object of it is you're taking your little plane and you're trying to fly it up to the edge of madness and then go 3 turns and escape off the board. You're leading an expedition that's trying to gather some cool artifacts and relics and knowledge of the past Lovecraftian civilization that lived there and bring them back to show your discoveries to the rest of the world. The mechanics behind it are all it is just taking your plane and moving to an adjacent square. On your first turn, you get to pick one of the coastal areas to drop your plane off, and the squares have challenges. So let's say this one, for instance, requires you to have tools and boxes. The tools here have to land between 9 and 11, and the goods have to land between 7 and 9. So each player would look at their hand. In this case, this hand, actually, he'd be able to do the boxes on his own. So you can see 5 and 3, that would fall in between 7 and 9 to complete that challenge. And he has 3 towards the tools. If you look at the next person's hand, this one works perfectly fine because you have a 6 out of the next person's hand, and they would be able to complete the rest of the challenge. By completing the challenges, you get the reward. In this case, it's arcane equipment, and that's one of these, which are the really powerful items which help you complete the higher cost challenges. And this is all decided while the hourglass is running. You look at the challenge, determine what it is, and then you flip the hourglass over, and you can see that the little red sand kind of piles up, and everybody has that amount of time to discuss what they have in their hand. It's the only time they're allowed to discuss what's in their hand. And then once the hourglass runs out, or once you're ready, everybody turns in their cards that they're putting towards the challenge onto the sled. Nobody else can talk about their hand after that. No other discussions can happen. And then the leader, which moves around the board, gets to look at them and determine whether or not they hit the challenge. So if you're not able to complete the challenge, or you do your math wrong, or you end up with the wrong amount in there, say this was all that ends up in there, you pass your goods, and we failed on the tools. So what you would have is a failure. A failure forces you to do one of 2 things. One is roll your penalty die. Your penalty die has a couple of options. One is confusion, which causes you to have to discard equipment cards out of your deck into the discard pile. Another one is injuries, which causes you to take 2 injury cards and put them into your discard equipment deck, which ends up just kind of filling up your hand later on with useless cards. And this one causes you to lose leadership tokens, which are things that allow you to do extra stuff. We'll get into that in a minute. The other option when you fail is to assign one of your players, based on the number of failures, to draw a madness card. If you're playing with a game with more than 3 people, you start out with madness, level 1 madness for every player. If you're playing with 3 people, you don't have any. But these are kind of things that get in the way. So like this one's too quiet in here. So whenever you're discussing and the hourglass is running, you have to yell while speaking. So that's not one that can really get in the way, but it can get annoying to the other people that are playing. As you move along, they can get a little bit more difficult to deal with. This one's, you have to stay seated on the ground while you're discussing, so that one's more of an annoyance than a hindrance. And here's like a level 3 is, I answer affirmatively any question that can be answered yes or no. So if it's yes or no, you're still saying yes, even if the answer is actually no. So that one can actually kind of get in the way. The cool thing about the madness cards is they're secret. So none of the other players know what's actually your madness unless they can kind of figure it out themselves. So you're going square to square, moving up the mountain towards your goal. As you go from coast to mountain to city to edge of madness into the escape, they get harder. And you're going to want to get more and more of these kind of things as you go along. Now, the high power items are not the only things that you can get. Something like this gives you a reward which allows you to heal. That allows you to take an injury card out of the discard deck. This one here allows you to search. Searching allows you to take any tile, flip it over to just you, so you're able to see it, flip the hourglass over, and you can memorize what it is. This one here, that one's also a heal. This one's praise. Praise allows you to take leadership tokens back from the discard and put them back on your sled. You also can have rewards such as these. These are things that you're trying to bring back. You need to have a lot of these at the end of the game, because if you have less of these in your possession than you have injuries in your possession, then you lose the game. But these are not usually good things. They're good to have for the end result, but whenever you draw one, they give you madness, or they move up your level of madness, and they have bad effects. Like this one, if you have this one and you're the leader, you have to discard the lowest level of weapon that you're using to pay off of your challenges. Okay, so during the game, you're going to be completing several of the same turns over and over again as you move towards your objective. The turn is broken up into 5 phases, 4 phases that take place every turn, and 1 that's an optional phase that you can complete. The phases are as follows. The movement phase. This is when the players that are playing discuss which direction they want to move the plane to. It has to be an adjacent space. And during that turn, the leader has final say. They can discuss all they want, but the leader makes the final decision. And as the leader moves around the table, you'll kind of see different play styles from different people on whether they kind of do democracy or they do dictatorship on what the decisions are. The encounter phase. The encounter phase is when you flip over the encounter card on the given space that you're on, something like this, the coast card, and as we were discussing earlier, you'd have to complete one of the challenges here. So this one's got penguins on it, and you got to complete the challenges on the bottom by playing the cards. You only have the time while the hourglass is running in order to discuss. After that, nobody can talk. This is also the time when the madness cards actually take effect. Most of the rest of the game, you don't have to do anything with the madness cards, but while the hourglass is running, you have to do everything that's on the card. Once you guys have discussed and you know which cards you're going to play, you play the cards out of your hand that are going to meet the challenge, and you throw them onto the sled. Once they're on the sled, you enter into the resolution phase. The resolution phase is when the leader picks up the cards that were played, looks through them to see if they complete the challenge. This one doesn't actually complete the challenge that I just showed you guys, but if it did, you would then get your reward that's on the tile. And if it doesn't, then you have to assess failure based on what we were discussing earlier by rolling the die or doling out madness cards. If the player that you want to give a madness card to as the leader already has a madness card, then they would go from level 1 madness to level 2 madness, and from level 2 madness to level 3 madness. Once you've doled out the punishments, that leads you into the draw phase. The draw phase is when every player goes back up to their maximum hand size. They get dealt out of the equipment deck. If your equipment deck has run out, then the leader decides who gets the cards that are left in the deck. And at that point, you might want to do the rest phase. The rest phase causes you to remove a leadership token from the game. So one of these goes away, out of the game, can never come back. And the remaining ones that you've discarded throughout the game get to go back onto the sled, and you get to shuffle your equipment discard back into your equipment deck. So let's discuss the leadership tokens a little bit further. So these are your leadership tokens. They are able to be used throughout the game in order to grant some benefits to the players that are playing. What the leadership token is going to do is based on what phase you play it during. If you play it during the movement phase, that allows you to ignore one player's madness card, the effects of it, throughout the remainder of the turn. And if you've kind of figured out that either you, by knowing your own madness, or by watching somebody else act out their madness, that is actually kind of getting in the way, it might be something that you might want to do, and you can discard one of the tokens for that. So you take that token and it goes into the discard. If you play it during the encounter phase, this happens after all the cards are played and after the hourglass has already run out. You're able to add another hourglass turn to your discussion and allow you to kind of get a way to get more of the correct cards into the scenario there. Like if you ran out of time during discussion, or the madness got in the way, or something happened. So that's another one that you can get rid of. If you play it during the resolution phase, that allows you to re-roll the penalty die. So you may roll the penalty die and come up with something that you don't want to deal with. So say you're running low on equipment cards and you don't want any more confusion. You might want to re-roll it and see if you can get something else, if you can't give anybody madness as a alternative to the die. If you play it during the draw phase, you are able to discard one of your leadership tokens and make everybody's maximum hand size go up by 1, which allows them to get extra cards into their hands to make the challenges later on a little bit easier to encounter. You cannot play tokens during the rest phase because the goal of the rest phase is to get the tokens back from the discard. And if you initiate a rest phase, then you have to remove one of those leadership tokens from the game. So now I think we've gone over most of the minutia and the mechanics behind playing the game, so let's get into my pros and cons. So, now that you know how to play the game, I'm going to talk a little bit about my final thoughts, my pros and cons, and I'll give it a final rating. We're going to start with the cons because I really only have one. My only real con is the fact that outside of learning how to move around on the board, there isn't a ton of strategy to the game. Most of the gameplay comes in reactions to the madness cards and kind of learning how to interpret the actions of the people that you're playing with. But in terms of actual tactics behind the game, there's not a lot. It comes down to moving around the board, knowing when to go from level to level, and when you're going to face that final Edge of Madness card to kind of trigger the end game. There's a little bit when it comes to when you play certain cards and when you have certain artifacts and relics that prevent you from playing all your cards, where like if you play 3 guns and the person who's leader has to discard the lowest one, you kind of have to play against that. But there's not enough tactics and like technical play in it to kind of appeal to me from that aspect of it, from a mechanical aspect. But now let's get into pros. Pros is a long list. I absolutely love the madness cards. The madness cards are a lot of fun, whether you're sitting on the floor or having to talk with a fake mustache or having to do one of the many like verbal cues that you have to do, like singing every time you speak, always answering in affirmatives, whether it's yes or a no. There's a lot of different things that can get in the way of gameplay, but also add to the fun of playing with your friends. If you're playing with a group of 5 people, which is the maximum you can play with this game, it doesn't drag on the game. It still kind of keeps in the same time frame because you're all acting simultaneously most of the time, and the the variety of quirks that you can get moving around the table is a lot of fun, especially when everyone's having to do them all at once. When everybody's at level 3 madness, it's legitimate madness at the table. Another thing that I love to talk about all the time when I'm talking about pros is the components of the game. The components of the game are a lot of fun. The airplane that you move around the board, that's a great little standee. It's actually a solid plastic. It's not something that you're going to break off pieces of it really easily. It's not made of cardboard where you're going to have to worry about it bending or getting wet and getting messed up to the point where you can't play it, or something like Dead of Winter where some of the pieces I had to actually glue them because they break so easily. The stand is attached to it. You don't have to attach it to it, which is always a point that can break a game piece. I love the hourglass. You're going to be turning it over a lot, so it has to be kind of like a substantial piece, and it definitely holds up. The red sand in it with the blue hourglass looks really cool. The tiles are well made. They're easy to punch out without getting the little tear points. I love the little sled and the player cards. Everything is substantially built. So beyond the fun and the components, there's also the fact that the game doesn't lie to you. When you pick up the game and it says it's going to take you 60 minutes, it actually is going to take you 60 minutes. The first game that we played was with 3 people, and it took 60 minutes on the dot, which is really rare, especially for a first playthrough when you're kind of just learning the rules and you might have to reference back to things. And that's something that is really rare. But even once you go beyond 3 players, it scales really well. Because, like I said before, you're not acting separate turns. Everybody's acting simultaneously. Every turn advances the whole game, not just a specific player. And that makes it scale really well, no matter how many players you have involved in the game. In terms of who can play it and what group it's good for, I'm pretty certain that you could, no matter what kind of group you're playing with, you'd be able to play with it and have a good time. If you're a heavy gaming group, you might be looking at it as something that's a little bit lighter, but it's heavy on the theme, and that's a great thing about it. So a lot of hardcore gaming groups that get together and play a lot of strategic and tactical games still might really love it because of the fact that it's so heavily steeped in theme. And the Lovecraft theme is perfect for games. That's why there's so many of them. And if for a casual gamer that doesn't play a lot of complex games, it's not that hard mechanically. The rule book looks daunting, but it's really not. There's a lot of diagrams in there, and the fundamentals of the rules are very simple. Even if you don't go into the little minutia of there's little windows kind of in there that explain specific terms, but you don't even have to read most of them most of the time. On your first playthrough, you kind of just figure everything out. It works really well. In terms of a final score, I'd probably have to give it like an 8.5, which is really high for me. But I like the game that much because it has a lot of replayability with the madness cards. You're gonna have to go through a lot of plays before you get through the whole stack. There's 3 separate stacks: the level 1, 2, and 3, and that adds a lot of combinations of madness that you can have going around the table. All your players are going to be interpreting them differently, so you're going to have a lot of replayability from that aspect. There's also a fair amount of tiles, so they're going to be rearranged, and since they're dealt out randomly, you're not going to get the same Edge of Madness card every time. You're not going to get the same mountain cards, city cards. Those tiles are all going to be different, and you never know what you're going to get. So you can kind of, with the random nature of the cards, the random nature of the tiles, and the random nature of the madness, it adds to a lot of variability and a lot of replayability, which are 2 really important things in my book. So down below, we're going to have some links where you can see where you can get Mountains of Madness. Doesn't cost you anything else, but it really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. So I'll see you in the next episode of Never Enough Gaming. Okay, everyone, thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate it. And if you love the Lovecraftian vibes going through Mountains of Madness, definitely try and check out my video on Eldritch Horror. It's already up on the channel. Stay tuned. Later in the week, we're going to be posting a video on Night of the Grand Octopus. It's similar in the Lovecraftian themes, but it's lighter, kid-friendly, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. So if you like what you're seeing on the channel, subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll get notified of everything else that I post. I'll catch you in the next one.